Okay. Zog Tehelig Gemara. We are on Daf of Dalet Amud Aleph, and we are up to Rabbi Eliezer. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 lines from the top, the last word on the line. Zog to Gemara. Rabbi Eliezer, Loi Chayish Rabia. Are you telling me that Rabbi Eliezer, the Svar of Rabbi Eliezer, why you cannot buy a paraduma from a goy? It's because of a special pasuk of Yikhu, which says that Dakma from Bnei Yisrael, Yikhu not from a goy, but he's not concerned about Ravia. Vatanya, we learned the Brisa, which proves, in fact, that Rabbi Eliezer is also worried about Ravia. Vatanya Amrulay le Rabbi Eliezer. They told Rabbi Eliezer, the Chachamim who argued on him, told him, we reminded him the story where they bought the paraduma of Dama Bedesino. And there, those is a remit shemai. So you see, you could buy it from a guy. Omar Lahen Rabbi Eliezer told him, Pun fakert misham raya. From there, there's a raya to me, and that is there's a raya that you cannot buy it from a guy. I'm sorry, from there, it's a raya that you could buy you could buy it from a guy only if you check, but you can buy it from a guy because there's a problem of Ravia, because he said, Misham Raya Yisrael Hayu Mishamrin Isa Misha Shanolda. So since this paraduma was being supervised by a mashkiach from the time it was born, we therefore are not concerned that it was nirva. But you see clearly that Rabbi Eliezer is concerned about that. Zok to Gemara, Eina Chanami. Rabbi Eliezer Tati is like Rabbi Eliezer holds there's two concerns if you buy a paraduma from a goy. Ist like kicha. The first concern is there's a Xeris Akasov in the parsha of paraduma that says you're not allowed to buy it from a goy. But there's an additional problem. The Chayish Nami the Ravia. There's also concern of Ravia. Omar Mar. So now we're going to drill down and analyze what Rabbi Eliezer said. Rabbi Eliezer said that Yisrael Hayu Mishamrin Isa Mishashanot. From the moment it was born, there was a mashkiach watching to make sure it wasn't there. Frag to Gemara, but you still have a problem. Maybe when the mother of this paraduma was expecting this paraduma, maybe the mother was nirva, and we're going to show you in a minute that if a pregnant mother is nirva, it's as if the animal itself was nirva. Rava said, asura. If a animal stoices a person and kills him, that animal normally would get killed if there's two edim. But if there's no edim, it's still usher for that animal to be used as a carbon. But not only is it usher for that animal to be used as a carbon, after this animal gives birth, the newborn calf would also not be able to be brought for a carbon. Why? Because the vlad was part of the mother when the mother killed somebody. That means the vlad was part of the body that killed somebody. It's the same thing with nirva. Vlad ha nirvas, the vlad of a mother that was nirvas, asura is also to be brought on the mizbeach. You vlad and nirvu. So even if they were watching this paraduma since it was born, it doesn't cover all the problems because maybe the mother was nirva. So to Gemara, Ema Yisrael ho yimasham noisa bisha shenoitzer. From the moment the mother became pregnant, they were already watching the mother. So the Gemara is going to ask soon, every pregnant animal, by every goy, we have mashkichim to watch, that would be impossible. So the Gemara is going to want to know how do they know to pinpoint this mother to watch. We'll get there soon. In the meantime, the mother, from the moment it was expecting, the mother was being watched. Maybe the mother was near her before she became pregnant, and once an animal is possible, even if it gives birth to another animal, that other animal will also be possible. It's not learned. Any animal that's possible to be brought as a carbon. Well, they're saying mutarın. Flooders are allowed to be brought. That's not where Akash is from, obviously. But the Tani Allah Rabbi Eliezer, who we're learning about according to him, Oyser. Rabbi Eliezer holds if a mother is also Mizbeach, for instance, she was Nirva, even if she has a child, that child's also Mizbeach. Zok to Gemara, Anichel Rava. According to Rava, we can get around this problem. The Omar Rava, Omar Rab Nachman, Machloikis, Kishenirbu, Kishain Mukdoshim. It's only a problem if the mother was nirva while she was hektish, meaning after she was designated for a carbon, then she was nirva, then she'll be possible as well as her flat. If she was nirva before they made her for a carbon, and everybody else for flat is mutar. So if that was the case, then we're fine over here, because as long as we supervise this mother the moment she was expecting, we don't need to worry that she was nirva before, because she was not designated as a carbon. It's only the child that we want as the paraduma. That the machlokes is kishenirbu kishen chulin. Even if the mother was nirva before she became a carbon, any time in her life if she was nirva, any children that she would give birth to would be also to be brought in the mizbeach. But if the animal was hektish, direk holosur, Sai Rabbi Eliezer, and Sai the Tanakama holds it would be also. But if it was nirva and then it was muktash, Rabbi Eliezer still holds that not only is it possible to be brought as a carbon, any animal in the future is possible as well. So my ikala meimer, how are you going to understand Rabbi Eliezer? Dr. Gemara, Ema Yisrael, Hayu Mishamin Oisel Ima Mishashanoichu. You know what the case is? The case is that the Yisrael was not only watching the mother when she became pregnant, we were already watching the grandmother when the grandmother was pregnant with this mother. Ema Yisrael Mishamin Oisel Ima Mishashanoichu. Correct the Gemara, well, when you still have a problem, maybe the mother's mother was nirva before she became pregnant, before we were watching her, and if she's possible, her child is possible, then the grandchild is possible. Dr. Gemara, Kula Hai Loi Chayshina. Taisur says Kula Loi Chayshina means not that we're not conscious that she was nirva. The same chash that the mother was nirva, the grandmother was nirva. But Kula Chayshina, the animal is not possible if its grandmother was nirva. And the animal is only possible if its mother was there. Okay, the Omar. The moment the mother became pregnant, they were watching. How do they know which mother is going to give birth to a paraduma that they should know while the mother's expecting to watch that animal? On Mapchista, they had a method. We have something called genetic engineering. They did the genetic engineering too. You know who invented genetic engineering? Yaakov Avinu. What did he do? He wanted the animals to be atudin, broodin. What did he do? He would cut wood shapes to colors so that when the animals are being zakuk, when they're involved in procreation, they'll see these things and that'll make them give birth to animals like this. Well, that's what they did with the paraduma. When the animal is being nizdakek with a zocher, they put something red there, and that will imprint red in the animal, and the cow that will be conceived from this will be red. So that's how they knew it was going to be a paraduma. If you can genetically engineer things, then the Maidemeh you can't. Why is it such an unbelievable thing? Why a paraduma is so expensive? Anybody can do it. You can use genetic engineering. Dr. Gemara, genetic engineering makes it that it should be red. But there's another problem. If there's even 2 black hairs, it'll puzzle the entire animal. With that, they needed special animals that were purebred animals that wouldn't have different colors. So once you do the genetic engineering to make sure that the baby born is red, this animal's pedigree is such that it'll be pure and therefore purebred. And that's why it's so difficult to find, because it's difficult to find animals that have such a pure pedigree. So, how did we know that the guy had this? We knew that the animals that this guy has were very purebred, and we knew that if we would do genetic engineering by this guy, the guy would have a beautiful paraduma without any black hairs. Zok to Gemara story. Yosef Rabami Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha Akila the Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. Rabami and Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha were at the front door of Rav Yitzchak Nafka's house. And what do they do when they're walking? They don't shmuz var b'telim. What it was they spoke in learning. And it says, Pasach Chad Minayu, one of the two tzaddikim here, either Rab Ami or Rav Yitzchak Nafka, said, V'omar, V'chein hoyer Rab Eliezer poshel b'chol HaKarbonos. Not only did Rab Eliezer say you cannot buy a paraduma from a goy, he said you cannot buy any carbon from a goy. B'chol HaKarbonos kula. That's what one of these two tzaddikim said. Pasach Itachim now, then the other one said, V'omar, Ma'ayoy sivu lei chavroy le Rab Eliezer. How did the Rebbe Eliezer's Chaverim prove him wrong to say that you could buy it from a goy? Zokt the Gemara, you know what they told them? They brought a pasuk. The pasuk says that ba'achas hayamim, people from Yishmael are going to bring their animals to be makir on the mizbeach as their makir that Rebbeinu Shalom is the true Bayrei Olam. The pasuk says, "Called sign Keder, all the Arab animals, yik yikam to loch, will gather to you, and they will be brought on the mizbeach." So if you, Rabbi Eliezer, hold you cannot take karbanos from a goy, there's a chash nirva. How in the future will we be able to take these animals that the goyim are bringing for karbanos? Amlan Rabbi Eliezer, that's not a raya. Kulam geirim gerumim. That's b'achas hayomim, where everyone knows that Klal Yisrael is being nigal. Mashiach's going to come, will be at top of the world, and at that point they'll want to be geirim. Now we know they don't accept geirim at that time, but these guys are trying. So they're trying, they're going to fear Zech Yiddish, so they wouldn't be Revei animals anymore. It's those animals that they raise after they're already practicing Yiddishkeit, those are the animals that we will accept them then. So, Geirim Gurim Haim Losad Lovey. Amr Yosef, Mikra, where do you see a pasuk that indicates that they're all going to try to become Geirim? Pasuk says, Evoich Elo Amim Sofa Berura. We're going to turn over all the nations to a new pure speech. In other words, they're singing a new tune now. Now they're all loyal to their Rebbeinu. So you see the tshuva. Omelei Abaye, v'dilma v'ayis kechavim hu dahadabu. The pasuk talks about that they're now turning to the Rebbeinu. So how do you know they're going to keep all the mitzvahs, including the Isra Reviyah? Maybe they're only going to keep the mitzvah of Anoich Hashem. They don't do Avoda Zara. But who said they're going to follow all the mitzvahs? Omelei Rabbi Yosef. The pasuk also finishes off with the words "La'avdoi Shchemecha." They're going to serve Hashem like one shoulder with Klal Yisrael, meaning they are going to follow all the mitzvahs, and therefore, at that point, we don't need to be worried about it there. La'avdoi Shchemecha. Rav Papa Masnahachi. This story that we just quoted, where Rav Ami said one thing, Rav Yitzchak Nafka said another thing. Gemara asked the kasha, Abai asked the kasha, Rabbi Yosef answered. This is exactly how Rav Papa related this story. But Rav Zvid Masnihach, Rav Zvid related similar facts, but with slightly different authors. So this is what Rav Zvid quoted as the story. V'tarvayu Amri, not one or the other said, both Rav Ami and Rav Yitzchak Nafka both said, Rabbi Eliezer, just like he apostles a paraduma from a goy, he passes all karbanos from a goy. And v'tevai Amri, not one said, they both said the next halach as well. What was the kasha that the Rabbanan used to prove to Rabbi Eliezer that you may buy karbanos from a goy? The pasuk of Chol Keder, you come to loch, like we already said. And then that Amr Rabbi Eliezer, he said it's not a right in the pasuk because kulam geim grumim, lost it love, they're all going to become geirim. Umay karim, where do you see the pasuk? It says Yosebach Am himself a brura. And then that maskas of Rabbi Yosef. So in the previous nusach that Rav Papa quoted was Abai asking this kasha. But Rav Papa has it as Rabbi Yosef asking this kasha. Maybe they only don't do Avoda Zara, but who said they keep all the mitzvahs? That means they were acting fully like Eden. So it's the same content as what Rav Papa said, but he attributes the different comments to different Amira. You're telling me that you cannot accept, Eliezer holds you cannot accept Karbonos Goyim. But we have a problem. Because Moshe told Parai, Moshe, not only are you going to free us and let us go, serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the Midbar, but Gamata Titin Tzvachim V'oilos. You, Parai, also going to send the Tzvachim V'oilos. How could Moshe have asked Parai to give Karbonos? They're all Shad Nirva. Dr. Gemara, Kodim Matan Torah shiny. When did this happen? It happened in the Mitzrayim. That was before Matan Torah. Before Matan Torah, Nirva wasn't a problem. Tashma, we have another instance where Goyim gave Karbonos. Because Yisrael, before he was a Megayer, was a Goy. How could we accept Karbonos from Yisrael? Maybe the animals were there. But the story of Yisrael was also before Matan Torah. Dr. Gemara, that's not unanimous. If you hold it that, you're fine. Yisrael is liachem Matan Torah. If you hold Yisrael was after Matan Torah, how did they accept Karbonos from Yisrael? Yisrael is often. Yes, Yisrael bought Karbonos, but he didn't bring Karbonos that he raised and he bought from Goyim. He bought from the Eden in the Midbar. He bought from them, and therefore we know these Karbonos don't have a chashash there. Tashma. Remember when Shaul failed and he didn't wipe out all of Amalek as he was commanded to do, and in fact he captured herds of beautiful animals. And when Shmuel saw that, he asked, "What are you doing? You were supposed to destroy it." So Shaul said, "Well, they're such beautiful animals, and the nation felt it would be such a shame to just destroy them. We're going to be makir them as karbanos." How could you be makir of these animals that they captured from Amalek as karbanos? You don't take karbanos from a guy according to Rabbi Eliezer. He was never planning to bring these actual karbanos. But since they were good animals, he would sell them and with the money buy animals from Yidden, and those would be brought as karbanos. So effectively, if that's the case, why did the Shaul say these were metav atzayin? Whatever they were, they could sell it and buy beautiful karbanos with the money. Let's talk to Gemara. The importance of why they were metav atzayin is the liquids alei and tvida. So they would be easy to sell, and then you would be able to have the cash to buy new karbanos. Tashma, we have another example. When David HaMelech wanted to buy a plot of land with a mizbeach on it to bring karbanos to the Kodesh Baruch Hu, the owner of this plot of land said, "Vayomer Ravna El David, Yikach, take my land. It would be an honor to participate in karbanos because he also believed in Hashem." Vayal Adoni HaMelech, my great master King David, Hatoy Be'enov, take whatever you want. Re'ei, whatever you want, you can take. You could take all of my cattle and you could bring them as karbanos. But my rigim of and the other tools that I have, the tools to plow and to do the other work on the farm, you could take that all and use it as wood to burn your karbanos. He was forfeiting everything he had for the karbanos shloim. But the problem is, how could you take his animals and be makrim them? If he's a guy, why aren't you choshesh for nirva? Rabbi Yochanan, our Vana or our Ravna Ger Toishev Haya. It's a Ger Toishev. And Rashi explains we're going according to the Shita that not only does the Ger Toishev swear off of Avoda Zara, he also follows the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, and one of them, of course, is that you cannot be Rabbi Yana. Zok Gemara as an aside, my Marigim. The Pasuk mentioned these tools and they called them Marigim. What are these things, Marigim? Amrullah Mita Shal Turbo. It's a terrible bed. Mita Shal Turbo. What was it? My Mita Shal Turbo. Either the Kurkus or the Daishan. It would be a very heavy board that had a whole bunch of cracks and splits in it, splinters, and they would drag it. They would use animals to drag these heavy boards across grain that was laid out, and it would crush the grain and separate the kernels from the chaff. It's what they used to thresh. That's what the tool was. I'm a of micro. How do you know that the word Marigim refers to this type of tool? Because the Navi tells us that eventually Klal Yisrael is going to become powerful, and we will pulverize all of the goyim and all of the cities and mountains and valleys that they live in. And the pasuk says as follows: "Hine samtich lemoirek." I'm going to make Klal Yisrael like a moirek tharut chodosh, like a new sharp moirek, balpifiyos with double-edged splinters. Tidai sharim, you're going to thresh and pulverize mountains. The sidaik, and they'll make it into fine dust. Voice kamoit tasim, and you're going to make valleys into just dust of the air. So you see that the word moireg describes this type of threshing tool. Once again, you're telling me that you're not allowed to take karbanos from a goy. Now, there's a fascinating story. And when the Pelishtim captured the Aron at the end of Shaul's rule, Eli Cohen died then. So when they captured the Aron, they didn't fare very well with it. Wherever the Aron went, it created havoc. So they wanted to rid themselves of the Aron and send it back to Klai. So what they did was the Pelishtim is they wanted to make sure they're doing the right thing. So they built a beautiful wagon, they put gifts in it, they put the Aron in it, and what did they use to pull the wagon? 2 cows. What type of cows? Cows that had just given birth that were nursing. And they kept the children behind. And they wanted to see, normally, a cow's nursing would never abandon its child. But Hashem made a nace, without anyone leading these Purim on their own, they started walking, made a beeline straight for the Machne Yisrael. So that showed a great nace, because even though normally a Purim would never abandon its children, these Purim just walked straight away, and that was an often nace. So when Elijah received this package, they broke up the wagon and they made it into wood. They used to burn the carbon. There's a parasa halu oil Hashem, and the 2 cows that brought this wagon, the Aron Kodesh on it, they brought us karbanos. So the question is, how could they bring these paras as karbanos? They came from Goyim. There should be chashash near. The Gemara there, it was hayrasha. It was a special. The Balto was such a big nace. There was hayrasha to do something that wouldn't be typically done, and as Rashi says, in such a great nace was done, they decided that they could bring it as a carbon. And anyway, I could prove to you from another perspective that this was a special incident, and normally this would not be allowed. Why? Because the Eloite Machi, this was a carbon oila. A carbon oila always has to be a male animal. Here they brought 2 female animals, 2 Purim, as 2 parais as a carbon oila. Oila in the cave, you never have oil in the cave. It's not a raya. This wasn't on a Bama toilet. This wasn't in the Bishkan in the Beis Hamikdash. This was about by Bama Ketana. My kusha dealing with Bama Shachit, Rav Ada Bar Abba, the Omar Rav Ada Bar Abba, Minayin Oil in the Keva, Diksheya Bama Shachit. How do you know that you could bring an oil in the Keva and the Bama Shachit? Shenemar V'Yigach Shmuel Kle Chalav Echad. Shmuel took a kle that was nursing, Vayalehu Oila, and brought it as an oil. Frank more, but Vayalehu is Mash was talking about a male animal, Zocher Mash. It doesn't say Vayalehu with above it, which would mean male gender. Rather, it says Vayalehu without the vav at the end, which is a mashmois that's the case. Vayelexim. So therefore, you have a raya that this was probably about Mashiach, so you don't have a raya that it's a Rasha. Zog to go more weiter. Omar Nachman Yitzchak. I'm sorry. If Yochanan said he has a whole different teretz. How did this whole sugi start? Our Mishnah says you're not allowed to give an animal to a goyish shepherd because he's choshed on being rebbe that. But the Gemara brought another Mishnah that says that you're allowed to buy karbanos from goyim. But the problem is, if there's a chash nirva, how could you do it? Right? So we had different roots. The last teretz we just entertained for the last block was it's a machlekes of Belezer and Rabbanon. A Mishnah going to Belezer, and that Mishnah going to Rabbanon. We had a different teretz of one's lachatchila, one's of the Yemen. Then we had the svar that a guy is makbid not to damage his animal. But a kolpon Rabbi Yochanan now wants to have a whole new teretz. Rabbi Yochanan are gvil yesh law. Not all animals will be damaged if they're nirva. Therefore, if you buy an animal from a guy that's less than 3 years old, you can be sure that it wasn't nirva, because that could get injured through a revia, so the guy wouldn't risk it. But bas gimel shanim, if the animal is more than 3 years old, ain't in that carriage, and then you need to be concerned that maybe this animal was nirva. So our Mishnah that says you can't give it to a guy, you can't give it to a guy because he's choshed on revia. But you could buy an animal from a goy for as a carbon if the animal is less than 3 years old. So we had all these rayas where they bought, where goyim brought karbanos. And Shanilu All the kashrus that we just asked of the last Amid, where Goyim brought karbonis, we can explain it away that these karbonis were less than 3 years old, so there's no chash rabeya. There's only one kasha that we just asked that you cannot answer that way, and that is the last case with the paros that brought the orin from the Plishtim. Tashima, it's a paros helu oila l'Hashem. So what does the Gemara want to answer? But they were less than 3 years old. Correct, Gemara, it's impossible that they were less than 3 years old, because I'm going to bring you a raya that a parah cannot give birth if it's less than 3 years old. And we know these parah had children, so they must have been more than 3 years old. What's the proof? From the halacha before. Mask of law, Rafuna Bered Rav Nos, Im Kain Hainu, Vespeneim Kolu, Babayas. They left the children of these two paras back in the stall, and they didn't let them go along. You're going to say that was less than 3 years old, and these animals gave birth when they were less than 3 years old. Mika Yolda, they would never be able to give birth. What not be learned? What happens if you buy an animal? You buy a para from a guy, and it has a baby. You don't know if this is the firstborn baby that it had. If it is the firstborn baby, it didn't have a carbon. It's a bachar. If it gets a mum, it goes to the kohen. If it's not a firstborn, you get to keep it. So when you're buying from a guy, how do you know if it ever had a baby before? So what does the Mishnah say? If you bought a parah chamor from a guy and it was less than 3 years old, we know for sure it didn't have children, and therefore, if a baby's born when you bought this animal, for sure it's a bachar. You can't velach, but if you buy it and it's more than 3 years old, Suffolk, it's possible that this animal already gave birth by the guy. So you have a clear raya that an animal that's less than 3 years old can give birth. So those parais that pulled the aron must have been more than 3 years old, and they were still brought as a carbon. How were they brought as a carbon? We'd have to rely on the pshat that we said earlier, that was a special Shah due to the enormity of the days. Beautiful. Zok to Gemara weiter. The pasuk says about these parais, there was nace after nace after nace. Visharna haparais b'derech al derech beishemesh. What does it mean by Bisharna? Let's see how to pronounce it exactly. It says Vayisharna haparas. The paras were Yisharna. What does that mean? Zok to Gemara. The cows were singing Shira. The cows were actually singing Shira. That's a huge nace. Now that's a little bit negated today, because today we had a Pia Osai that talked. Bilam's donkey talked to it. But these parts were singing. Zok to Gemara. Rapsutra of Artuvia Omar Rab is a Yashu Panem Kenegad Orin Barbashira. The bigger nace than that. They turned their necks around 180 degrees, and they were facing the wagon, they were facing the Oren, and saying Shira, yet they were going in a straight line straight to Machane Yisrael. Zok to Gemara, Umay Shira, what was the Shira that they said? So we have a whole bunch of different shittas, what they said. Rabbi Yochanan said, not his own type, but their mayor's name. We're saying Shira to Hashem, Ki Goy Ga, Hashem triumphed over all the goyim. So that's what happened here as well. Rabbi Yochanan said, they said, Amartim Bayamahu, Hodul Hashem Kiru B'Shmai, Aduvam Aliloisov, all the Amei Aretz learned that Hashem is the Melech Malchei Amloch. Rabbi Shimon Lakish Amar Mizmar Yasma. The Mizmar that we don't know who said it. It doesn't say Mizmar David, just Mizmar. Shir Hashem Shechadosh. In the Flois also Hashem et Nisim. By Shila Yamina is very kachoi. This is referring to this Maisa. Rabbi Lazar Amar. So it says Mir Shir Hashem Shechadosh. Who said this? Not David. The cows. Rabbi Shimon Nachmani Amar. They said Hashem Malach Geus Lovesh. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha Amar. The shira that they said is not a pasuk. It was their own made-up shira, and this is what they said. Roini sing, Roini hashita, sing for the aron that's made out of atashita. His noififi, become exalted, lifted up, aroif hadarich, with your beauty. Hameshuchekes berik mezah, you're wrapped around with gold ribbon. meaning the Aron was wood on the inside and then had a gold cover on top of it and inside it. Bidvir Armoin Hamahulala Bidvir Armoin. It's praised with the Dvir Armoin referring to the Torah, Mufu'ar Ba'adei Edoim referring to the Luchos. Rav Ashi Masnila Lahadir Bitzchak, he holds this Shira was not said by the cows. This Shira was said by Klal Yisrael. When? Aha, it says, Vayibin Sayah Aron Vayom Moshe, Kuma Hashem. So when Moshe said that, Moshe Kuma Hashem Yivutu Evecha, Yenusu Mishanecha Mipanecha, Yisrael my Amr, what did they say? Amar Bitzchak, and that he said, Roini Ashita. Amar Rav, some interesting information about language. Kaman Kari Parsari Lasafer Dvir. Where did it come from that Persians refer to a sefer, a book, as a devir? A devir is a book. Because it says, Vishem devir lefnim kirya sefer. The city devir was called also kirya sefer. So you see a devir is referring to a sefer. Kaman kari parsoy l'nid deshanta. The Persians refer to a nida as a deshanta. Kamar mehacha ki derech nashim li. Derech nashim li, in short, is deshanta. So that's where those words came from. Okay, let's stop here. And because now we're talking about a new story, about the story of when the sun stopped in the middle of the day when Yeshua was fighting the 5 nations to save the Gavonim. So we'll save that for tomorrow. Baruch Hashem, we resolved to finish Daf Chav Dalet today. Tomorrow, Bez Hashem, Shabbos Tammuz, we will learn Daf Vafe. A good Tavach, everybody, and a good bench Tavach.